Now let's add some variable renewable energy generation resources to our mix here. So let's say that we have a 24-hour period here again, and we're going to use solar as our example in this particular case. Now, we talk about this as being a non-dispatchable load, but there are some things that we know about a resource like solar energy or wind energy. We may not be able to turn it on, but we can predict when it's probably going to be available, both on a daily basis and then on an annual basis. So for the solar, within a 24-hour period, we know it's probably not going to be available in the middle of the night unless you're living in the high Arctic, and that its maximum availability is probably going to be in the middle of the day. So you see something like this. So assuming that you have a nice sunny day, this is the type of generation profile you might see from solar in a particular market. Now, there's times where that generation might be interrupted and it's not so perfect, which could happen because you might have some variable cloud cover. And if you've got a fairly large grid and these solar panels are distributed resources that are spread across a pretty big geographic area, that cloud cover isn't necessarily going to impact the overall the minute-to-minute fluctuations in solar output, because not all of those panels are going to be covered by that variable cloud cover at any particular point in time. But you might see sort of an aggregated decrease in the solar output across a particular generation profile for a day. On the other hand, if you have a small grid, a microgrid, that's in a pretty small geographic area, those sorts of events like cloud cover, momentary cloud cover, are going to have a different impact on your grid output. So what you might see in that case is some pretty discrete dips in terms of the output from that solar, from those solar panels when you're seeing that variable cloud cover impact the resource. On a large grid, this net impact of solar energy is going to look to a grid operator like basically a decline in a decrease in the overall load demand for that particular market during that time when the sun is available. And if you start to add a lot of this can really start to become difficult to manage for grid operators. As you add more and more solar, you start to see a reduced demand from these more conventional sources of central power stations. And at the same time, you're starting to see much higher need for ramping of power, like during these evening spikes, for example. So this starts to become challenging, especially once you start to dip down into and below that minimum threshold that's sort of set by your baseload power generation. In this case, you're sort of looking at a situation where you might need to curtail that solar and might not be able to take advantage of that power that's being produced from the sun during that period of time. There's a couple options when you have a large grid for dealing with this. One is to integrate a bigger geographic area. So hopefully you're seeing a little bit more spread out generation from these variable renewable energy resources, and there's users in different geographic areas that can benefit from that power at that particular point in time. Another option is just to be able to take that power and use different kinds of storage strategies to shift that available energy towards those evening hours when it's needed. And so these are things that are happening on these larger grid levels. And a lot of times we hear about this being talked about as like this duck curve for solar energy. That is a big challenge.